sometimes with her sister, would take me out there, and I'd spend the summer. And eventually I would, stay there a year or 2 years and then come back to California and do the same thing over and over again, back and forth.
And how did you, so let's say age 5 or 6, you go out and meet your father for the first time that you can remember, right? Because kids don't really have a memory before they say about the age 3 or 4.
Yeah. I mean, I remember vividly as, we'd fly into Corpus Christi. And the first time I met him, he had a big old afro. It was the 70s. It was probably about 1976 when I first met him. I was about 5 years old. And I just remember seeing his silhouette from my airplane window to... Back then, you could actually go to the gate,
okay.
And I would see a silhouette with a big old afro. And
was he African American?
No. He's Latino. He's American, Mexican American.
Just really curly hair.
Back in the days, he had curly hair. He had the rake and bell bottoms and everything. Yeah. So it was 70s action, big time back then. So yeah, I met him, and I remember saying, "Do I call him Dad or do I call him Joe?" Because his name was Joe. So right away, when I met him, and he reached out to hug me, and I hugged him, and I said, "Dad," So it was a natural connection.
And so the first time you meet him, you spend a few months with him, or is it a brief amount of time?
Yeah, I spent, I believe, a summer there with him in Corpus Christi. And I also met my grandparents, who were awesome people.
Wow.
They were my parents.
Mm-hmm. So your grandparents became...
Right. Sorry, I'm getting a little sensitive, emotional here, but they were my parents.
Yeah.
My dad was, he was a Vietnam veteran, served in the Marine Corps. He owned his own business. My grandfather and my grandmother owned their own corner store business in Corpus Christi, in a little town or a community called Molina. Molina was primarily occupied by blacks and Hispanics. So when I got to meet my grandparents, I mean, it was a free-for-all for me because I had all access to candies and Cokes and everything out of their gas station, and I was treated like a prince, by my grandparents. As I got to know my father, he had issues. I think probably what was called, they didn't know, PTSD. Mm-hmm. So he was very, physically abusive to me. Verbally abusive was worse, the worst part, right? Mm-hmm. So to say the least, I learned how to fly when I was about 6 or 7 years old. In other words, he'd throw me across the room and things like that. But, so he became somewhat of a monster, and I feared him and I hated him after a while. And so,
what's the youngest age that you remember him like mistreating or any type of treatment? But you said
it was probably when I was around 6 or 7 years old. I mean, he was a nice guy. Don't get me wrong, and he was nice, especially when he was high. But when he was, stressed out, a business owner, employed, the guy was, strikingly handsome. He had hazel eyes like my grandmother, right? He got some of those genes from her. He looked like Christopher Reeve, not as tall and handsome, but Christopher Reeve, the Superman. Mm-hmm. But he was just women loved him. He loved women, right? Mm-hmm. He was a business owner. He was making good money doing what he did. He liked fast cars, women. It was the 70s, I guess. So he had a crazy lifestyle, and so for me to go and get involved with him may have been something that he could not handle yet, because he didn't have that experience of raising a child.
And that was you. Are you his only son?
Yeah, I'm his only son that he knows of, I guess. I mean, but he did get remarried years later. And, I now have 2 half-sisters, and they're in their 20s, so, but, yeah.
Wow. So you mentioned your grandparents. Were they living with your dad or dad with grandparents
so
back then? Or?
My grandparents lived in a house there in Molina, in Corpus Christi. The neighborhood from my dad lived probably about 8 miles away, a different part of Corpus. And so I'd spent a lot of time with my grandparents because they were, I guess at that time, ideal parents. My grandfather, he was a loving man, caring. Kids from the neighborhood would go to the store, and he'd be giving them candy for free, just giving out candy. And my grandmother was running the store, and then my grandpa he was more like, hey, I'm going to go hunting today or on the weekend, and my grandma would be taking care of business, kind of like my wife is with me in our business. She takes care of the business financially, and I'm the one out there. Hey, let's go out there and get it. Let's go get that contract. Let's go and buy this and this. And so in a sense, I guess now that I realize, yeah, she kind of, my wife kind of reminds me of my grandmother in a sense. She's the one that kind of makes sure that the finances are in good standing. They don't go too crazy and buying too many things.
So I'm curious, what got you to get a little emotional? Was it because you just remembered your grandparents, or you remembered how they treated you versus your dad, or what was that all about right there?
Yeah, so to this day I still visit my grandparents. They both passed, years ago. And so I go to their graves, and they're buried together. They're in one of those, what do you call it?
A double stack.
A crypt, or
in a crypt, yeah. Their coffins are, back to back. They taught me a lot. They taught me how to be forgiving. They taught me about God. I was
Christian,
Catholic. I was raised in a Catholic background. They taught me how to give, right? And my grandmother would say, "Hey, mijo, right? Put $1 in the tray, and God will bless you many times over." I didn't understand that, right? I'm not going to give away my $1. I mean, I want to, But anyways, they taught me how to give, right? They taught me empathy and sympathy, and they were just fantastic people. They were my lighthouse in a sense. My father also taught me positive things as well. He toughened me up. You know what I mean? Because I was raised by a woman for the first 5 years of my life. My mother was, struggling here in California and financially. And she tried to provide for me. I saw the struggles, but when you're that young, you just really don't understand it so much. But you knew that there was times where there wasn't food, right? Or there wasn't enough food in the refrigerator, and she had brothers and sisters here, locally who would all, borrow money or help each other out. So to go from an environment where we're living in a little one-bedroom apartment and struggling, and I can see her struggling, to going to Texas where my dad is doing very well financially, has a nice house and things like that, it would make me feel guilty, especially when I got older. I felt guilty whenever I had nicer things. Or if I'd make money, I would send the money to my mom. Hey, Mom, look, I would work for my dad, So my dad taught me about the importance of owning a business and saving, making money but at the sense he toughened me up too. And what I mean is, he was sometimes physical with me. He taught me I didn't want to be him when I got older. And now I am married with my wife for 11 years this year. We have 3 young children. God didn't bless me with my children until I was later in my life, older. And so when I raise my children, I have patience. I be careful what I say. I don't let my anger take over me, because I don't want to be that guy that my dad was when I was younger. It's very obvious.
Let's say something. So like the Bible talks about, fathers, don't provoke your sons to anger or wrath. Then another place the Bible talks about to be angry and sin not. And I think there's this with most men, especially because I think you speak to a little bit here, like, and I'm speaking to the encounters you had with your father as a child. You saw your father, and in many ways you needed your father, although your grandparents sort of stepped into that role. The idea of like being angry and sinning not, I think it's okay to have anger without allowing it to act out. So like, say, for example, you said your dad taught you to fly. At that point, you've crossed the line, right? Now you're provoking your child to wrath or anger. So you're not stimulating the child in a proper way. But I would say this to any man that's out there, because largely the people that would listen are men. Being angry is okay. There's going to be times and seasons of life where you go through different things of frustration, especially in owning a business where you're not going to be exactly, skipping along and smiling and singing, right?
Yeah, which is a lot of the time.
Precisely. And that's okay. That's not wrong. And so I think it's important to like give context to the reality of it's okay at times to be a little bit angry. Like sometimes I don't even politically, if I think too much about what's going on politically in America, or if I think about different things, anger can be stimulated in me, and anger in and of itself is not evil, right? It's at the point you begin to sin, or you act out in anger in an inappropriate way. And so I would say, like, when your encounters with your father, like, every young man needs a man. They just do. And I think every child needs a man. And as you sort of wrestled with identity and all these other things, like, I know your grandparents become that, but in some ways, I think you're able to like see your father for what he was, even as a child. Like, hey, I need this relationship, but I also, in these areas, I'm not going to be like him. And so those moments where he was abusive like that, and I guess when you had your first kids, how old were you?
I'm 53 right now.
Okay, so in your 40s.
Yeah, my late 40s. I had my first boy in my late 40s. So.
And I'm sure you behaved much differently. But I would say this to any young man that has kids out there. Hey, there is going to be times and seasons where you're going to have some anger in you. That doesn't give you a right to act out. Say, for example, be abusive to your wife or abusive to your kids in that kind of way. But it's okay that anger is sort of like, at times you'll have moments of anger or frustration. That's okay. In fact, it's sort of natural. It's going to happen. It's, I believe, when you allow it to control you. And you begin to act out in sin. So, like, if I come home from a situation as a father now, and I'm angry about, I don't know, some interaction at work, the workers, my guys, whatever, it's okay to have like a bad day or have a little bit of anger. But to begin to act out that on your children or be abusive to your wife, abusive to your kids, that's when you've crossed the line. So I think to give context to it, that like a lot of times we'll think of anger as like it's inherently evil. Well, the Bible sort of puts it in a context where we can be angry and sin not. Where literally I can at times have this anger. I just can't let anger control me and dominate what I do and when I act out in sin. And so I think when you see this interaction you have with your father, it's very inappropriate. But you also, even as a young child, it seems like you were wise enough to realize, like, I need my dad, and even more than that, my grandparents sort of stepped into that role.
Yeah, I even when I would leave Texas to go back with my mother, I would cry. I miss my dad. I miss you, despite what I went through. And but I would get over it really quick, like a day. But when I would leave California to go see my dad, I'd be homesick for weeks at a time.
So you'd miss your mom?
I would miss my mom more than I would my dad. Maybe it's because I worried about her more than I did my dad. I was concerned about her welfare, her safety, even at a young age.
She never remarried, or?
No, she never remarried. So, so going back and forth from California to Texas, it took a lot of adaptation. You don't grow roots.
Right.
You don't have a place to call home, even though you might have one. If that makes any sense. I knew that I wasn't going to be in that bedroom for more than 3 months to a year. And when I got back to California, I didn't know where I was going to be living at. What was I going to be living with my mom and her mother at her home, or was I going to be living, you know what I mean? Because my mother never had her own home that I could recall. We were always living with somebody. And when we lived with somebody, my mom and I would always share the same room, right? I'd have my own bed. She'd have her own bed.
What kind of work did your mom do?
She was doing secretarial work,
okay.
And but whatever she made, she'd always make sure that I had the essentials that I needed to have when I was going to school. And it was the developing part of my life. Whether I liked it or not, I learned from those.
How many years
times.
did you go through? Was that phase of your life? How long was that phase that you would go back and forth to Texas, California?
Up until I was about 18 years old.
18. Oh.
18. When I decided to come back and live here permanently is when I had enough, because about that time I was in high school, finishing up high school just about, and I wasn't doing good in school. I was doing poorly. And my dad said to me, you might as well just quit, drop out of high school, and work for me full time. And I said, no. And I said, I'm done. I'm going to go back to California, and I'm going to live in California full time. I'm not going to come back I didn't go back for years, actually, after that. But I had this drive that I wanted to have a relationship with him, and I kept on forgiving him. That's a big part of anyone, to be able to forgive somebody.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So I have a forgiving heart. And my wife says, you forget and you forgive too quickly. You forget about the people who tried to screw you over. Mm-hmm. You give them chance after chance after chance after chance. And I says, yes. Because that's what God has given me. He's given me a good heart, right? I'm not saying she doesn't have a good heart. Mm-hmm. She's out there to watch me, to make sure that I'm protected. Because I've had people for years take advantage of me. For years. People, I don't want to say people's names, but she was like, no, stop. That's enough. Mm-hmm. Stop asking for this, that, because I'm a giver. Mm-hmm. I don't, this is who I am.
Yeah.
My wife is a saver.
So where did you pick up? So now that we know a little bit more about your background, where did you pick up some of the things who you are right now? Like, for example, the angry dad that would toss you around or physically, verbally abuse you. Mm-hmm. Who are you now in that part? That side. Because you did mention, because you did mention that you're like, I'm not gonna be that person,
mm-hmm. Right?
So who are you now in that experience as a young man?
As a young man,
now that as an adult, So now as an adult, how did your adulthood? How did your childhood shape your current adulthood?
Yeah. So how you father your own kids. So like you've seen how your dad did it, right. But then what did you learn for like improvements in your own area of being a father now?
Well, to have more patience. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Not to do drugs, not to use drugs as an excuse to escape reality. Mm-hmm.
Would you see your dad doing drugs, by the way?
Yeah, marijuana was common in the house. There was a Frisbee with, stems and seeds, and weed was there. It was there all the time in front of me. It was a medication for him, it was illegal.
Back then it was a scandal.
Still is. Yeah, back then it was like a real big scandal. Yeah. I mean, there were people coming to our door, hey Joe, hey, I got your stuff. I'm like, who's that? And that's this little Joe, he's got my stuff, I'm watching, and it was common. Mm-hmm. Alcohol, marijuana, pornography there was porn magazines all over the place, mm-hmm. In the restrooms and things like that. I didn't live in a really good environment. It looked pretty from the outside because my friend across the street had a mom and a dad, right? Mm-hmm. He had brothers and sisters. I wanted his life. I wanted to be there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know what I mean? I wanted that security mm-hmm. that they portrayed or that his parents gave to him. And so you looked at our house, you had a fancy 300ZX in the front, this dad was built. He still is built today, by the way. Gold chains and, he's just women coming and going, and, it was a crazy lifestyle, man. It was just crazy.
So why did you not choose that?
Because it was not the answer. For me, it wasn't. Yeah. How did I know? Yeah. I can't give you a straight answer how I knew. I just saw what it was doing mm-hmm. to him, right? And my moral compass, I guess you can say, for a lack of knowledge or whatever. I'm not saying that I never tried weed or I just knew that it was a dead end.
Yeah, that lifestyle.
It was a dead end, mm-hmm. So, because when I became, as a young adult, when I left Texas to come here to live with my mom, right? That was another storm. I thought I was going to go into a storm into, I don't want to say paradise, but a better way of living. And I remember when I got here to California, I was crying, and I'm like, did I do the right thing? Did I leave Texas and leave my dad when he's the father figure, and then I remember drawing on a piece of paper, I go right to California or go left to Texas, and I'm weighing what do I do? Here I am, like 18 years old. I says, okay, I'm going to stay in California, and then I'm gonna follow and get a career here. I'm going to do something. And then that's when I discovered that my mother's, she had mental health issues. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, oh, okay. So she was seeing things and hearing things, and she lost her employment, and it was a storm, from one big storm to a bigger storm, in my opinion, at that time in my life. And so here I am trying to work 2 or 3 jobs.
18, 19, 20 years old.
Right. Working 2 jobs, 3 jobs on a 10-speed, living in the city of Indio, in an apartment that we were about to get evicted out of. Right. I mean, she had a little Pontiac Fiero red. I remember it was a pretty cool little car. Anyways, that got repossessed, because she wasn't making the payments. Then we got evicted out of our apartment eventually, and we were living in Indio, and she moved in with her brother and one of her brothers, and I was just living. I got a little apartment in Palm Desert, and I'm like, life is not fair. Life sucks, right? I'm like, why is this all happening to me? You know what I mean? I don't have a father I can really go to for advice or help. My mother's mentally ill. And I'm just trying to have to figure out everything on my own. Nobody taught me anything about finances up until somebody came and approached me about Primerica. Okay, back in the 90s. I'm like, this is the answer. This business is going to show me how to become, wealthy. I can take care of my mom. I can learn about finances, this, and that. And thank God I ran into those folks back in the days, because, it kind of gave me a direction. I started reading books, from Tom Hopkins, The Art of, How to Master the Art of Selling, which I applied towards the jobs that I had when I was growing up.
And by the way, did that start your entrepreneur spirit, or did you already have it down since your dad?
I had it down when I believe with my grandparents.
It was in your DNA.
It was yeah. My grandparents had their business. My dad has his business. I wanted my own business. I wanted to go in law enforcement too back then. I always wanted to be a cop, but I also wanted to own my own business, right? So everything that I wanted to happen in my life has happened. Okay, I didn't understand how I was going to do it. I just knew that as long as I worked towards it, it was going to happen. And sure enough, it did. It took time, right? It happened in my 30s when I got into law enforcement, but it happened. I didn't know what I was doing. I just knew I had to show up somewhere. I had to buy all these books, these domains. I had to go to an academy, and I graduated, and I got picked up by a police department, and it was a dream come true at that time. To see myself driving a black and white, wearing a badge and a uniform, it was an incredible feeling at that time, So,
how old were you when you became a cop?
I was like 31.
31?
31, going 30, around my early 30s, yeah. So it was fun. I had a good time. But when I got out of law enforcement, I knew that I wanted to have my own business, right? And so I went and got licensed to operate the business I'm in. And here we are, 15 years later, 14 years later, 15 years later. And my business, our business, has helped me. It's been a great vehicle for me to accomplish the dreams and the goals that I always wanted to accomplish. You know,
that's cool.
And it's not a walk in the park. You know, as business owners, it's one of the toughest thing I ever done in my life.
Yeah.
I have seen ups and I have seen downs, and I have seen downs more than I've seen ups. And when you're up, you don't realize you're up because you're too worried about. You just see all the, you know what I mean? You see all the negatives things that are happening, and you just look, and you got to like, whoa, slow down and kind of like look around and thank God for what you have.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like today, I was at home because one of my vehicles, my Chevy, has an electrical problem or whatever. So I had to go meet the tow truck at my house today. So I left my office, drove down there, and I parked outside of my house, and realizing he already took the truck. And I look at my house, and I see the home, and I see the cars, and I see the playground that I built the kids, and I'm like, wow. I mean, it's not a mansion.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's a big house, but it's not a mansion. But it's just the power of belief.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
The power of God is my compass. And whenever I need him, whether I need him or not, he's always there. I can always go to him. 3 o'clock in the morning this morning, I was going to him. He woke me up. Do you guys get woken up at 3 o'clock in the morning at all?
There's been times, yeah.
It happens to me a lot, right? My kids sometimes wake up at 3 in the morning, 2 in the morning. And that's the hour when God will talk to you.
Mm-hmm.
He has something to tell you. But that's the witching hour too. And that's when the devil is planting seeds in your field to try and ruin you. But that's when God says, hey, you need to wake up. Talk to me. Pray to me. And when I talked to him this morning, and I'm laying there, and I have a sense of peace, knowing that he did hear me. Anyways, you asked me what got me through all these years. It was God.
Yeah.
I had a relationship with him.
Yeah. So I think that's an important part of it. We'll back up to the entrepreneur part of it in a second. But speaking of your spiritual experiences, encounters, when did that start? So I know you're raised Catholic, but when did God become real to you?
See, my grandparents taught me about God. They had a shrine in their home, that little house with Jesus in it. And they do the rosary at night, and it was almost like a seance, and it was kind of creepy to tell the truth, and they're going with the beads, and then I'm like, no, and then my grandpa jumped in, no, and it was, and I'm like, ugh. And then they'd finish, okay, mijo, we're done. And then they'd get the toast, jelly, put on the Benny Hill show, and you're watching Benny Hill show after you prayed, right? But if anyone knows about Benny Hill, I mean, it was borderline, pornography, so on cable TV. So I love Benny Hill, by the way. He's funny.
I've never seen it.
I don't remember.
I don't even know Benny Hill.
Okay, check out Benny Hill. I mean, he's funny. So yeah, so
he's like a comedian.
Yeah, it's a comedian,
okay.
right?
Okay.
Just check him out. So
right.
It's like it was right after the Carol Burnett show. So if you know who Carol Burnett is, no,
I didn't have a lot of TV as a kid. No, I was raised without TV, so I'm not a good reference for pop culture stuff.
Right. So this was the 70s, so
Yeah.
But yeah.
Wow. So when did God become real for you though? So you watched your grandparents, and then
yeah. So my grandparents taught me really to fear God. I don't think they meant it. You know what I mean? To teach me how to fear. But if I did wrong, well, you can go to hell. I'm like, I don't want to go there.
No.
You know what I mean? I believe started developing a relationship with God, a loving one, probably in the 90s, because I got introduced to a Christian church, and it's Victory Christian Center there in Rancho Mirage.
Oh, Pastor Jeff Walker.
Yes.
He was here last week.
Oh, really?
We interviewed him last
wow.
week.
He was our guy last week.
That guy is awesome.
Yeah.
I met him when I was probably in my 20s. Yeah.
What a small world.
And I was there in his service, and I got invited by a coworker or something. And what I liked about the Christian church is they actually open up a Bible and they read verses, and they teach you about scriptures and things of that. Of course, the music too. The music was just, I listen to Christian music too. I have it on my phone, and not all the time, but I do listen. I was listening today. And I believe I started connecting with God then.
Good.
You know what I mean?
So you would say probably in your 20s?
In my 20s. Right.
Okay.
Because, I mean, I'm not saying I didn't have a relationship before that, but I really just started connecting then.
For sure. God became real to you.
Yeah.
Like, it's one thing to see your parents have their experiences, but there comes a place where for a person it becomes real for them. It's their own faith.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And so I bought a Bible, right? I started reading my Bible and going through it and reading the verses. And I'm not, knowledgeable in the Bible. You can ask me how many books on 66 books in the Bible.
There is, yeah.
Right? And there's one where there's a verse that says, do not worry about, what you're going to eat, what you're going to wear, because God, provides you.
Yeah.
God provides the birds. They don't worry about what they're going to eat. And so I started understanding that. And then that's when I started realizing if I just give him my cares, right?
Absolutely.
Things will start falling into place. But they didn't happen right away.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It took many years for things to happen.
Yeah. Let me take a theological detour. We'll get back to it. So when Jesus says that's Matthew 5, 6, and 7, which is a Sermon on the Mount, right?
Uh-huh.
And so one of the main themes that sometimes people miss the big picture of the Sermon on the Mount is Jesus is saying, don't worry, I'm going to take care of you.
Right. Like
literally he's saying, don't worry. He says it multiple times. Like, I'm taking care of the flowers in the field, the birds in the air. Don't worry. And so it's this idea of trust in God and don't let worry overwhelm you. And I think to any believer, it's very important that we don't allow our lives to be controlled by worry, anxiety, and fear when Jesus is saying, I'm going to take care of you. When you put your faith in him, he's going to take care of you.
Absolutely.
And it's an important way to live. Like, the way you really, I think, begin to succeed in life is when you worry less and have faith more.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. And sometimes that's hard.
Oh, it's so hard.
Especially when you have a lot of responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
When you have 45, 50 people counting on getting paid every 2 weeks, that's stressful.
Mm-hmm.
When you got to pay the IRS, and you got to pay pay the employee taxes, and you got to pay for everything that's you're responsible for. That's stressful.
For sure.
And sometimes you don't always have that money in the account. Sometimes you have a client or two owe you $40,000-$50,000. Hey, where's that money? I need that money. I'll fly out to Texas and get because we're in Texas too, right?
Yeah.
I don't mean to put anyone on the on the radar, but so
give him his money,
exactly.
Please.
Give him my money. You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, it takes discipline to have patience.
For sure.
And I know we're jumping around, but building a business and not having money for payroll, it requires faith.
It does.
It requires you to have who do I turn to?
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
God.
Exactly.
Can you help me out? Hey, what you tell me not to worry?
Yeah.
Right.
One of the comments I would say that hopefully people would listen to is, I never try to take advice from people who haven't built something.
Mm-hmm.
When I say that, there's a lot of people that sit over in the critic's corner, and they've never built a family, and they've never built a business, and they've never built anything in their life.
Yeah.
And they're hypercritical of everything else that's going on. Like, I don't know, critical of politicians, or critical of different people, and hey, what have you built in your life? And if you haven't built anything, I love you, but I'm not going to take your advice.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to be harsh to anybody, but if anybody's listening out there, it's very true. I try not to take advice from people who haven't built something. If you think it works in a lab, there's even professors, hey, do you have a family? Have you ever built a business? What have you actually done? I mean, it's okay to talk about in theory and in a lab, but what have you actually done? And so one of the things I've said in my life, I try not to take advice from people who haven't built something.
Yeah.
Because building a business is going to take faith. And building it takes all those immaterials, that grit, that tenacity to hang in there when other people might fold and fail. So I would say to any person out here, try not to take advice if somebody hasn't built something. But if that person's built something, and don't get me wrong, nothing lasts forever, right? So every company that comes along, every house that gets built, everything nothing lasts forever. I get it, but take advice from people who've built stuff.
Yeah, and there's a story of a business owner who had a daughter, sent his daughter to college, and and in college she went to business school. But it's funny how he's like, my daughter came back and started telling me, Daddy, I learned all these things about business and you're doing it wrong. But the dad has had a successful business for many years.
Yeah.
Change this, Dad, change that. And I promised, look, this is what I learned in business school. And he went out of business.
Wow.
Exactly. And I've had many professors, because even through education, they talk about this, and the ones that didn't ever have a business or actually never built anything, I begin to realize early on, I can't take their advice because they've never done it. It may work in a lab, it may work in a book, but does it work in real life?
Yeah,
Right,
you know the
exactly.
theory, and then
Yeah.
what's crazy is that she learned business from a college professor that has never owned a
Never
business.
had a business.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't have any business experience either in my past, other than watching my parents or my dad and my grandparents. But yeah, you have to take a risk.
You do.
It's a big risk.
Huge.
Right? I mean, you guys know. You guys are business owners.
But a lot of our audience might not know. And since we're in the topic, I mean, this podcast is about one of the things that I talked about. The intro is to be a provider, and I know business is definitely. We were talking about this is not for everybody because some people don't have the. I don't know. I don't even know how to explain it, but. Because it is tough, and you do go through tough times, and you want to quit almost every day, but it is actually an amazing way to provide for your family.
It is, and I would say to any person out there, like it's easy to be critical of the boss or the man. I mean, I'll give you an example just to be specific. Like Donald Trump, a lot of people are super critical of him, and usually they're people who haven't done anything, like a journalist who writes a paper. Or, they've never actually done anything. Have you ever had a business? Well, he's been bankrupt, blah, blah, blah. Have you ever had a business? Do you actually know what he's doing? Well, he didn't pay taxes, blah, blah. Do you know about these taxes? And so people that have no reference as to what's actually going on are super critical. And so I would just say to any person out there, you're exactly right, Rob, when you bring up the girl or whatever, like maybe that it's not your calling to own a business. But can I give you some advice to maybe if you're just going to be an employee or work for somebody else, fine. But you also need to be careful how you criticize that person that is the boss or the man, because they don't understand the pressures, the commitment, everything that person's put on the line to make that thing happen. Yeah. And so then it's so easy to say, well, I don't know, they had a little bit more money or they went to a fancy restaurant than me. It's easy to be really critical of people that are succeeding from people who haven't done anything. And so I would just say to any person out there, you're right. I would encourage people, if you can, you should go into business at some place in your life. Win or lose. Like go into business and just try it out. Like, I don't know, sell grapes and sell fruit or just do something simple. Just see what it's like. Understand the pressure and the weight of what it is to be in business, because I think when you do that, you'll also be less critical of those that do. So when I look at like a Donald Trump, man, I sympathize him in so many ways and he's at a really high level, right? He's been very successful, a very proven person. And it seems like so many people are super critical of him, but do you know what he did? Say, for example, he wasn't personally bankrupt, but he had to bankrupt some of the entities that he owned. So every building he owned, he had to, like if a market goes down, which was the casinos, he had to bankrupt a casino because the market crashed out there as far as that business. That's sometimes what you have to do in strategy and in business. And so people that don't know are oftentimes very critical. And so I would just say for a lot of people that don't know, like if you've never done it, you should be careful with how you criticize people, because they don't understand the pressure and the sacrifice, the faith that it took to get there, and the grit for the people that soldier on. And so I would say this. In my life, I try to elevate people that have built stuff, and I want to listen to their voices. People that have never done anything, they're just super critical. I just turn them down to like a 1. Like they're not going to speak into my life because they don't have much to offer me. And I'm going to take the people that have succeeded and have done something and to listen to them a bit more.
Very true.
Yeah, that's a good way to go out and build something that you want to do. Who do you know that has what you want? Like, for example, and I'm curious to ask you this too. So as a business owner, would you say you run a successful business?
I do. I believe we do run a successful business because I have people who apply their talents and use their talents with our business. So if I let them use their talents, then I don't really have to worry about taking care of that department or whatever. He knows what he's doing. The CFO, my wife is a CFO, so she knows what she's doing. I'm not going to argue with her, right, when it comes with the money. Because going back to payroll, I'm like, geez, babe, we're short on payroll. What are we going to do? And she'll watch me pace up and back and forth, stressed out. Oh, my hair is getting grayer. I'm like, at least I'm not losing it. Well, when I had COVID, I was losing it. But anyways, and she'll like, well, okay, all right. How much do we need? I'm like, what, you have it? Yeah, I have it. I put it away, stocked it away, just in case of a rainy day. I'm like, oh, thank you so much. I love you, even more. So if there was a young gentleman that wants to provide in a big way financially, and knows and sees, let's say, the lifestyle that you have and stuff like that, and if he was to go up to you and say,
hey, Steve, can you help me out? Can you show me, like, give me some tips? What are some of the things that you did? Some advice as a young entrepreneur. You would do it, right?
I do it all the time.
Yeah.
And
all the time.
That's something that, so if anybody's listening, they should know that if they do want to build a business, there's people out there that all you have to do is just ask, because they've probably been through it, and it's not like they're looking. My point of view is that people that have successful businesses have an abundance mindset. They know that they're not teaching their next competition or competitor. They know that there's enough to go around for everybody. So they're more than happy to share the wealth of knowledge.
For sure. And a lot of times, so I remember like some of my professors, like I had a sociologist, and a lot of times they're liberal in school, and he would always treat like the economy as a fixed pie. Like there's 8 pieces of pie and that's all there is. And everybody's fighting over there's 8 pieces of pie. The reality is that's not true. The pie keeps growing. So they're not 8 pieces. There was 8 pieces today. There's 9 pieces tomorrow. There's 10 pieces the next day. The pie is going to fill the whole room in a week. It keeps growing because of innovation and stuff like that. So I would agree with you. Like as far as counseling and helping people, coaching people along, absolutely. But people have to realize like it's not everybody fighting over a little bit, because the thing keeps growing and getting better. And you might bring something onto the table that nobody else has done before. Like the internet, it didn't exist 20 years ago, and it does today. And it created all kinds of business opportunities. And so I think as time moves on, there's all kinds of opportunities in ways unimaginable even right now that are coming our way. And so the pie keeps growing. And I would just say to every person, I still think it's important, try to do it yourself. Like try to get out there and actually be in business in some way or another.
Yeah.
You know, and like a lot of times they say about like government bureaucrats, they're experts and have never done anything. They become an expert in a specific field, but they never did anything with it. And then they retire. But they never did anything. Whereas somebody that's out in the real world with a small business, and I'm very passionate about small businesses, that's the lifeblood of our economy. And really, all businesses generally going to start out as small businesses. They may grow to become monopolies at some point, but generally businesses start out on the smaller scale. You innovate, come up with something new, do something different, and grow your thing. And I'm a big fan of those that are in small businesses. It's the thing that employs so many people. It's also the thing that there's innovation at that level. And so I'd encourage any person, start a business. Like try to live out your dream. Give it a chance. And if you do, it might succeed, it might fail, but nonetheless, the life lessons learned from it will make you a better person because of it.
It's good stress. It's a stress that makes you become a better person, that makes you grow. So
it's the pain of growth. It's like if I go to the gym, I'm gonna walk away sore. I know when I walk away from the gym sore, it was good for me. Right? I and that's the same is true of like business or things like that.
Yeah, especially if you're working for somebody or a company or whatever, and you have people there, managers or whomever, are encouraging you to quit, which happened to me many times. Sometimes those are blessings in disguise. I remember working for a company out in Palm Springs, and I knew when I was in my late 20s, I knew that I was better than what they had me doing, right? I mean, they put me in sales and marketing, right? And I learned that the person that was doing that, in my opinion, wasn't doing a good job, because when I was making contact with the same clients that he had, well, we never seen him. He never comes around. We don't get this, we don't get that. And I brought that up to light to him. Next thing you know, I got pushed out and I'm sweeping warehouse floors. And I'm like, really? I was in tears. I was so upset. And the manager's telling me, hey, listen, he was a district manager. He said, hey, don't worry about it. You're okay. You're going to be fine. And I'm pushing, I'm sweeping, and I'm like, no, I'm done. Right? And I got another job, and throughout life, you're going to run into people who are going to push you into hopefully causing you to take that leap. You know what I mean? There's a lot of people out there working a job they hate. They cannot stand going to. Yet they still do it. And life is, as you know, it's way too short. I mean, here I am, 53. I remember when I was, 43. It was just, it goes by so quick.
It does.
So take a chance at something. You know what I mean? Find something that you think you're good at. Doesn't mean you have to quit your job, slowly but surely, just, take small steps and then take that leap. That's what I did.
Yeah, that's good. So, now that we went into so what are your goals? Like, what do you see yourself doing, like, as a, not only as a business owner, but also as a father? Because your kids are really young.
They are.
And so what are some of the things that you've learned as a father now, parenting your kids, and also what are some of the things that you see in the future, that you want to see your kids? Like, what is your goal for your kids? Like, what kind of future do you see for your kids?
Well, as you know, Raul, you take care of our mutual funds, our investments. And by the time they get to high school or graduate, they're going to be sitting pretty nice based upon the numbers that we see. Mm-hmm. But I don't want it to be too easy for them. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I want them, and I tell my wife, I like to see them go into the military. Really. 2, 3 years, 4 years, whatever. Mm-hmm. Learn discipline. Not that I'm not going to teach them. I'm not going to teach them the way my dad taught me, but I'm going to teach them, from what's right and what's wrong. But I like them to get that military background and take advantage of that. I wish I had done that. I didn't do that, right? But I want them to do that. They don't have to, but I like them to do that. And all 4 of them, right? And so my wife wants them to go to college and get a degree. And I'm here to tell you, and I went to college myself, but college isn't for everybody.
Right.
It's not. I got my 5-year-old, Jesse. I don't like school, Dad. I hate school, right? And I'm telling my wife, I says, hey, school's not for everybody. Well, it's going to be for him for the next, 12 years. I'm like, yeah, it's going to be, but, it's just not for everybody. Bottom line. In fact, I had a teacher who told me that when I was in high school. And she says, college isn't for everybody. And I was like blown away, like, whoa, teacher's telling me that? That's crazy, right? Because you figure the teachers want you to go further your education. Yeah. But, college isn't for everybody. That's why you can go learn a trade, go to trade school, make good money in a trade. You don't have to go to college and make good money.
For sure.
You don't. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? But college does help. It helps you further your education. There's things that I need to gather in order for me to get a permit or a license that requires college. Mm-hmm. So in my business, so it's not a bad thing. It's a good thing, but at some point in our lives, we all are going to need it for whatever licensing. Sometimes that we're like the police academy. I had to have some sort of. I didn't have to have any college. I did have to graduate from high school, but I already had college experience. I already had my AA degree in administration of justice, but it was helpful, but it wasn't a necessity, So, but yeah, I want them to go to school. I do. If not, go to the military. If not, learn a trade. If not, learn the business. You can already see it. Like Jesse James, my son Jesse, my middle one, he's going to go into law enforcement. You can see it. I can tell. He just loves. He dresses up, and my older son, he's going to be a business owner. I can tell it. The way he talks and the way, you know what I mean? You can tell. My daughter, Sade, she's going to be a boss because she bosses everybody around, you know what I mean? So it's just, even me. So
she might take over the business.
I'm curious to see how White's going to be our next son. So, it's interesting.
Fun.
Yeah.
Looking back, if you could, now you're 54, you said?
53.
53. Mm-hmm. What advice would you give yourself at 18, 20 years old?
Don't quit.
Yeah, really.
Keep on going. Keep on going. Take one day at a time. Mm-hmm. You don't have to know everything right now. And have faith. Believe in yourself.
Yeah.
Because, at the end of the day, it's all about you. It's about what you do that's going to get you to where you want to go. You know what I mean? You'll have people in your lives, as you guys know, whether it's a teacher or a friend's parent, who are guiding you. I've had many people come to my life who were positive influences, and I thank God for them every day. I thank my Uncle Felix. I thank my teacher, Peggy Long. She used to be a teacher at Coachella Valley High School. She was an art teacher. She was going through her storms back in the day, I remember, too. Yeah, many people have come into my life. My grandparents are still there for me. I feel them sometimes.
What legacy do you want to leave behind?
So, I mean, that's a big question. I want my kids to, remember me in a positive light. You know what I mean? And, let's face it, unless you're a president or, some big influencer, you're probably going to get forgotten about after the second generation or something like, you know what I'm saying? And they're going, who's that? Oh, that was my great great grandfather. Oh, okay. But my goal right now is to make sure that my kids are well off and that they are taught to respect everyone that comes across them. I tell them, you say yes sir or no sir, yes ma'am or no ma'am. Mm-hmm. You don't talk back. The basics. I get angry, yes, but I monitor my anger because I know that verbal abuse is worse than physical, way worse. It will haunt you for the rest of your life. Things that he said to me when I was a little kid or a teenager are still in my head, right? And you got to fight that sometimes because sometimes what was said when you were younger can influence you to do the good or bad things, or even prevent you from exceeding in life sometimes.
Yeah. Do you get mad, Pastor?
I do. Probably less now. I mean, I don't know if I internalize it, but I don't usually act out on it that much. But I think every person would have to admit, especially men, we get mad.
Would you say men more than women?
Absolutely. And men have a way of blowing off steam though too. Like, so for me, I found healthy rhythms on how to blow off my steam. So if you play me in basketball and I'm mad, I'm Michael Jordan.
You're going to dunk on somebody.
Yeah, I'm Michael Jordan. So I can express my anger in ways I think that are not destructive. Mm-hmm. And I think hopefully men can figure out ways of doing that in life because every man's going to deal with anger. Yeah. You just can't let it destroy who you are. So there's ways of blowing off the steam that's constructive. I remember even for a season when I'd have problems, I had a fast car, a Mustang GT500. So drive that fast, have fun, racing around. There's ways, and we can argue whether that's illegal or illegal. Sorry, but yeah. But I think there's ways that are probably constructive where we can sort of channel anger where it's not bad. And I think probably that's the best way to move in life. So just find ways of expressing your anger where you're not taking out on your kids or your wife. We're not destroying relationships. I think one of the problems we have in our world today is we don't value relationships enough. Mm-hmm. Too many people are willing to if you this, I'm done with you. And we shouldn't be that way, especially with relationships. Relationships are the most valuable things in life. Relationships, they're more important than money. They're more important than anything. I mean, the relationship we have with Christ is what saves us, right? When we literally are with God or not, it's based upon our relationship with Him. Mm-hmm. So relationships by far with Him and with others is some of the most valuable things we have in our life. And so I think we should value that more. I have people that I love that owe me thousands of dollars, and I don't care. Oh, well, you owe me $10,000. Maybe it was dumb of me to loan it. I love you anyway. Mm-hmm. It's not an issue. I've heard people, I won't talk to that person that owed me $100 from years ago. I'm I could name you probably 3 or 4 people that owe me $10,000 plus, right? But I'm not going to destroy the relationship of that little bit of money. It's just a little bit of money. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to destroy the relationship. The relationship is more important to me than that money. And so I think we need to value some of the relationships we have because those are more important than the money we have.
Yeah. I like that.
Yeah. Can I borrow $10,000?
I told somebody the other day, I said, I've realized I'm not a good bank.
Yeah, you gotta when you lend somebody money, you gotta come to that realization. Look, if I lend it to them, I gotta decide in advance that if they don't pay me back, that I'm just gonna call it a loss.
There it is.
Cut my losses.
Yeah,
you're right. Keep the relationship.
Anyway, we probably need to start wrapping things up here. Steve, in closing, any advice you'd give to anybody that's out there, specifically young men, maybe going into family or some of the things that have helped you navigate life and succeed?
Yeah, forgive and forget.
I agree.
Maybe not forget, but forgive.
For sure.
Okay. Today I have a great relationship with my dad. He's 78 years old.
Good.
We have a business in Texas too, so I see him when I'm there. Mm-hmm. And with my mother, she lives with us. She lives in our casita. And so, just have patience and don't be in a rush to have things happen to you. They will happen in due time.
Yeah. Well said.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much,
You're welcome.
Steve. Thanks for your time. Appreciate
Steve, it was
you.
amazing.
Inviting
Yes,
me,
sir.
man. It was